Hey everybody, welcome back to the Mentor Nation podcast. It is your host, John Abbas here, coming from my home. And I know if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm sorry. This should be the last couple of episodes where I have just a blank wall. Haven't got around to decorating my podcast studio yet because I've been focusing on the movie theater. I wish you guys could see behind the screen. There's actually a bunch of panels of wallpaper, which are thousands of movie posters. I'll send a pic and I'll post that on Instagram here shortly. But anyway, I want to welcome you to the podcast. If you are here for the first time, glad to have you. If you are back, then I want to welcome you back. Either way, if you have not hit the subscribe button, please do so that you're immediately notified anytime I release a new episode or put out some really cool content. I will give you a heads up. I'm putting out some incredible episodes over the next few weeks. I'm going to put some of my own, talking about things that I get requests for all the time, including investing, building a business, stock market, things like that, just things that I have had fun doing, I've had success doing, but I can't wait to show you something else that I'm doing, which is sprinkling in some episodes with some local entrepreneurs here that have built 6-figure or higher businesses, some 7-figure businesses in a year, starting from scratch with nothing. We dissect everything, like how they did it, what they did. And so I'm just excited for that series. So make sure that you subscribe so that you get notified. But that brings me to today. Today's guest, I'm very excited to introduce you today to an absolute rock star. Jordan Montgomery is the founder of Montgomery Companies. And, cool thing about Jordan is he built a highly successful multi-million-dollar financial practice in his 20s, only to discover that was not his calling. Must be nice, right? But after making a pivot to follow his passion, which is coaching really high-level people, executives, top tier athletes, he found success right out of the gate because he started following his passion. And it's because of his ability to help people reach breakthroughs very quickly. And I was so excited because anybody that can coach the highest level people to help them achieve breakthroughs and take things to the next level, imagine what they know and they can share with all of us. And that's exactly what we cover in today's episode. Jordan shares a little bit about his story, and then we get into some of the pillars that he uses to help high achievers take things to that next level. Some of the things that he shares today, he charges people thousands of dollars for. So make sure that you pay attention. I'm just so excited for this interview. So sit back, relax. Well, actually, don't relax. Get a pen and paper, get ready to take some notes, and please help me welcome Jordan to the show. So Jordan, I just want to thank you for being on the podcast, man. I've been looking forward to this interview ever since I had to unfortunately reschedule because of my move and the internet. But man, I'm really glad that you're on, and I can't wait to pick your brain.
It's good to be with you. I was excited for this conversation as well. Todd Armstrong speaks so highly of you. He was kind enough to connect us, and ready to dive in, brother. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So before we get started, I love doing research, and it's the funniest thing. So Todd sends me your headshot, and I look at your headshot and I'm like, oh, wow, like clean cut, maybe Ivy League, successful entrepreneur, like soft spoken. And then I roll over to YouTube and I'm like watching some of your videos, and I'm like, holy shit. You bring it like Eric Thomas, the hip hop preacher. I was like, this is very different than what I was expecting, but I love it, man. I love your energy. And so I just can't wait to have you on, but it was really funny just going from your headshot over to YouTube and just watching the way that you coach, man. It's incredible.
Well, I appreciate that. I'll take that as a compliment. It is funny because we do a lot of work in the world of sports.
Yep.
And I always have to call it out, right? Like, I'm not in the room with athletes because of my incredible athletic resume, right? And I'm 180 pounds. I got a hard part, and I live in the cornfields of Iowa. So we speak to the Ohio football team tonight, and that's literally how I'm going to lead off. And so we got nothing to hide, man, but we sure love life, and
that's awesome.
Love getting to do the work that we get to do.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of that, I really was hoping that we could focus this interview today on just your best wisdom for someone listening to this episode on just how they can be a peak performer in their life and in their work. I watched a lot of your videos, and the results that you have gotten for people is pretty insane. And, you've built this massive coaching business, and you've helped everyone from major athletes to really high paying executives make shifts in their mindset and in their actions, leading to results. And, deep down, I personally feel that the only way that you could achieve something like that consistently, time and time again, is that you have to be operating using some specific set of principles and actions that lead to those results. And so, well, first off, would you say that's an accurate statement?
I would say that is profoundly true. Yes.
Awesome. And so I would love to have you share those things that, you've seen work time and time again in the people that you coach. And just, I'd love to have you speak on some of, the process behind that as well. But first, I have to get to know a little bit about your story before we begin, because that's what makes you you. And I'd love to just have you share a little bit about, how you got on the path that led to where you are right now.
Yeah, man. Thanks for the question. I am a simple guy from small town Iowa. I grew up in Kelowna, Iowa. It's a town of 2,500 people. One stoplight, don't blink kind of town.
Yep.
Blue collar background, went to the University of Iowa. I wanted to own my own business, but I had no resources, so zero capital, and I didn't really have a network. I didn't understand how to build a business. So right. I started in the financial services business because I could be in business for myself, right, but not by myself. I had a support team and I had a structure. It was kind of like the franchise model, plug and play. I didn't have to invest any capital. We built a business at a very young age, at a fairly high level. And that business allowed me to develop the business that I have today, which is a coaching and consulting business. So I pivoted because of a mentor pulled me aside and said, hey, I think you could do the work that I do. I started to do it on the side. That work sort of blew up almost overnight. Within about 90 days, we'd replaced revenue from the coaching business from our financial planning business. So got out a plan. I didn't intend to pivot, but it's what happened. And I'm leaving out some details for the sake of time, but we're just so blessed, man. I run this company with my wife, Ashley. We have 10 partners on our team that do a lot of the coaching work.
Wow.
So we do keynote speaking, coaching, consulting. I work a lot with athletes, executive leaders, like you mentioned. And we live in small town Iowa. We got 3 girls just like you. So
yep.
Girl dad.
Yes, exactly.
And life is good, man. So that's the 2-minute on my story.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that process. Now, you said something in one of the videos that I was watching that really resonated with me. And you said that your goals were set before your values were clear. And I really like that. And I just was wondering if you could take a minute and explain a little more about what you meant by that.
Well, it's interesting because most people prioritize what they want to accomplish before they really think through who they want to be. And that was my story. I spent a lot of time on what I was doing and where I was going. I didn't spend enough time on who I was becoming. And I see this with a lot of young business leaders, entrepreneurs, athletes. They get really focused on what they're accomplishing and they're not really spending a lot of time on who they're becoming. And so when your values are clear, decisions are easy. But when your values aren't clear, decisions are difficult and we make the wrong decisions. And so we spend a lot of time with early stage athletes that come into a lot of money, business leaders that have a lot of success. And we're constantly working on who they're becoming. What are your core values? What do you really believe? Who do you really want to be? Because it's the who that should drive the what. And if we're not careful, our goals will take us to a place that we never wanted to be, right? And so that was my story. I was 27 years old. I was really oriented around what I wanted to accomplish. I was not grounded in who I was becoming. And I made a couple mistakes in business that sent my life sideways. And we can talk about that. But
yeah, I would love to. I would love to actually go into a couple of those mistakes, if you don't mind.
Yeah, man. Of course, I'd love to. It's interesting too. Like, I think people can be impressed with your strengths, but I think people connect through your weakness. And so we're in the business of communication and connecting and leading. And I think for all leaders that are listening, if you really want to connect with other people, you got to learn to put the hard stuff on display,
That's right.
And when I decided to do that, when I decided to own my story and own my issues and talk about my problems and be more vulnerable, all of a sudden it's like the world opened up in front of me, and we went from having a little bit of influence to a whole lot more influence because we became more human, and vulnerability begets vulnerability. If you want people to be vulnerable with you, you got to be vulnerable with them. So 27 years old, top of the world, penthouse to the outhouse, literally overnight, was working in the financial services business. I had a staff member who was my sister-in-law, took a test on my behalf, 9 months pregnant, so I didn't turn her in. It was an internal test. It was like a CE type test. But those things can't happen. And when they do happen in that industry, you got to report them. So didn't report it, thought it was a small thing. Like a lot of issues, right? Small issues become big issues.
That's right.
A small issue that I didn't address, and it became a big issue. And it was enough of an issue that temporarily I had to pause my license inside that industry. So it all worked out, and I ended up getting it back, and the company figured it out. I had a lot of good people around me that helped me kind of put my life back together. But I was building $1 million house at the time. The bank wanted me to re-underwrite the loan, had to fire sale the property. I lost 90% of my clients. My revenue got cut by about 90%, but I still had a lot of the expenses. I was just a young guy that was living for the ways of the world. I was caught up in image, status, my bank account, and I was letting those things define my success. And overnight, I had to change all of that. I could no longer define my success through my bank account, my achievement, or my status, but I really had to look inside and say, who is Jordan Montgomery? I had to find my identity for the first time in my faith and in my character. And that's really where my journey of personal growth began.
Wow. A lot of people, especially entrepreneurs, they're just like that, right? Like they get so focused on the goal and the things that you're talking about. It's like they think it's the cheesy stuff, right? They're like, oh, I don't need to figure out who I am. I mean, and I see that over and over and over. And I have a very similar story. Like I got out of the Navy, me and my brother, I was 23 and my brother was 19. Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. We went to New Orleans. We started a construction company doing roofing, and we made a lot of money in less than like a boatload of money, more than I'd ever made. And my character wasn't there. And I found myself a year and a half later, broke, like literally with nothing, 200,000 in debt with my first daughter on the way. And it was only at that moment that I was like, okay, like I've got to change some things. And so I really want to have you speak on that. Like you lost everything. You had to make some changes. Like, what were some of those changes that you actually, like, what was the process that you went through? Because you did it yourself, but you probably didn't have somebody at the time saying, hey, Jordan, you need to do this, 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 and this, but you coach a lot of people before they get to that point, so what do you take them through? What kind of process that like really helps them, prevents them from running into some of those obstacles?
Well, that's a great question. And I think, first off, all personal growth and development starts with self-awareness. So if I'm going to help somebody grow, our first priority, priority number one is self-awareness and situational awareness. And that's a journey that never ends, right? We're always attempting to be more aware. We're always growing in our self-awareness or situational awareness. I was working with an executive leader recently. We're in a coaching conversation, and he said, I didn't become really self-aware until about 10 years ago. And usually if somebody says something like that, it's a sign that they're not very self-aware. And this guy is not self-aware. Like he's not, and he thinks he is, which is the root of the issue, right?
Right.
And so we would start with self-awareness. And how do you grow in self-awareness? Well, you ask a lot of questions, right? You get a lot of feedback. You ask for help. You start to listen. You listen more than you talk. You surround yourself with the right people. Your environment drives everything in your life. Your environmental game drives your mental game. Your mental game drives everything in your life, but it starts with your environment. So it's self-awareness, it's situational awareness, it's taking the environment very seriously, and it's the people, places, and things that habitually show up in your life. If we can control that, if we can control the environment and start to put the right people in someone's environment, if they consistently ask for feedback, they consistently ask for help, they listen more than they talk, then we're on the path of growth and potential. If they're not willing to do that, we're going to struggle. And I don't care if they're a high-paid executive leader, if they're a very successful athlete.
Right.
Every one of us has to continually slow down to say, what feedback am I getting? What questions am I asking? Who am I surrounding myself with? If we're not on that path consistently, we're not growing.
That's powerful. So obviously we live in a world now of people desiring quick fixes and instant everything, right? Instant success, instant rice, instant oatmeal. And I watched a video, you were talking to some athletes, and they were all sweaty. So I'm assuming it's like maybe at halftime or in the middle of a game. And so, you don't have a lot of time, and they're in the middle of the game, and you have to share something that allows them to make a really quick shift. Like, what do you say? What do you do? Like, so for those listening here today that they want to work on themselves, but they also, want the fastest path to do that. Like, what are some of the things that you say that they can do right now that they can start making a shift immediately?
Well, I would say number one, you got to really add value to other people.
Okay.
So you want to find your circle. I'm going to take this from David Nurse, who I just interviewed yesterday on our webinar series. And David Nurse is working with about 150 NBA athletes, and he talks about the golden 15. And I love this principle of the golden 15. So finding 15 people that you can obsessively, relentlessly add value to, right? I want to become masterful at adding value. I want to be others focused. I want to be you-centered in my communication style. And I think if you're paying attention to what provides value, what lights people up, what brings energy to other people, if you're focused on them, if you're truly focused on them, if you ask great questions, and here's the deal, you don't have to know a lot, right? So like if I'm working with an athlete, it's not really probably about what I'm saying. It's more about how I'm saying it, right? I want to be a lid lifter. Sometimes people ask me the question like, Jordan, what do you actually do? Like we see you talking to the athletes, whatever. And some days I don't know, but I would hope at the end of my day, somebody would say, Jordan is a lid lifter. He helped people see more and he helped them see before. They saw before and they saw it before. And if we can do that, if you can do that, if you're listening, if you do that with other people, you will increase your influence, you will increase your impact, and you will grow. And my friend Bob Berg says it this way. He says, in the economics of human interaction, spending doesn't deplete, it multiplies.
Oh, I love me some Bob Berg.
Isn't he the best? Dude, he's the best.
Yeah, I interviewed him maybe 5 months ago. So he's one of the episodes. His book, Endless Referrals, changed my life.
So good.
When I was losing my restaurant. I mean, I was just like, this is like so amazing. And then The Go-Giver was like the best book ever. And like so much of what you say, like feels like it's coming from The Go-Giver, just that concept. So I just, I'm glad that you really like him. He's one of my favorite people ever. He's just the happiest dude you've ever met in your entire life.
So happy. And he walks the talk, right? Like he's genuine, he's authentic. He follows up, he checks in, he's not too good for anyone. So he has mastered the art of providing value, of making people feel special. And absolutely. I think if you learn the art of that, if you can connect and add value, you can accomplish anything. I really believe that. Because this world moves through connections and relationships. And the people who are really getting stuff done in this world are masterful at adding value, connecting, and growing relationships. So that would be my perspective.
Absolutely. Now, when you say adding value, like, can you give some examples of that? Because I think a lot of people think that in order to add value, they need to give money or be a customer, but there's like a lot of like really creative things that you can do. Like, what are some of the ways, like your golden 15, for example, Jordan, like what are some of the things that you do to add value to other people? Like, is there like a routine or a process, or like, do you have it on your schedule? Like what's like, just some examples, if you don't mind.
So, this is going to sound really simple, Okay. And I like simple things. I'm a pretty simple guy. One way that you can add value is to be very prepared. So John, you provided value to me in this conversation because you're prepared for the conversation, right? Like,
Right.
you know my background, you know what I do for a living, you've watched my videos, you've read up on some content. Well, how does that make me feel? Well, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel like you value our time together.
Right.
It makes me feel like this is meaningful to you. So what's my response? Well, I'm more engaged. I'm more excited. I've got greater energy about the conversation. People don't always remember what you said, but they do remember the way that you made them feel. And when you're prepared, when you put in the extra work, when you know your audience, it changes the way that people receive you. And it changes the way that people feel about you, right? So I'll give you an example. David Nurse has become a good friend of mine, right? We just did the webinar yesterday. We were talking about David. Okay, so before we did that webinar, like you prepared, I knew everything there was to know about David Nurse. I mean, literally everything. I mean, literally down to like, I had looked up his stats from his days playing basketball at Western Illinois. Like, I knew where he grew up. I knew where he went to high school. I could tell you about the clients he works with. I knew who he was married to. I knew what he liked, what he didn't like. I follow him on social media. Now, somebody would say, hey, dude, that sounds really creepy. And maybe it is. But if you want to add value, you want to make people feel special, you show up prepared.
Absolutely.
Right? You're prepared, and you added value to me in this conversation because of it. So that would be like step one, and anybody can do that. That takes zero talent. That's energy and effort. If you put in a little bit of energy and effort and you know your audience, you're going to stand out from the rest of the crowd.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, because I agree so much, like being prepared is such a powerful thing. So when I first started this podcast, I didn't know anything about podcasting. I wanted to start it because we were building a tech startup, and I was like, this would be a great way to make connections. I didn't realize at the time that I would love it. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, so how do I get really like successful guests on here? Like, what do I do? What do I say? So and it worked, but all I did was I took my favorite business podcast, which at that time was Entrepreneurs on Fire with Johnny Lee Dumas.
Great podcast.
And I made a list of every guest that he ever had on the show. And I started listening to their episodes, and I would just reach out to them one by one. And I would say, hey, I listened to this episode. This thing that you said really resonated with me. And I just really think my audience would, even though I had like one person in my audience at that time. But man, people appreciated that, being prepared, reaching out, asking for something specific. I'm so glad that you shared that example, because you're absolutely right. And the last thing I wanted to add is just like to piggyback on what you're saying, like you and a lot of the other entrepreneurs that I interview on here, everybody's hustling all the time, but the really successful ones are the ones that do exactly what you're talking about. They're slow down, and they're not just me. What can I get? Well, how can I improve? It's just, I know it'll return later, but who can I serve today? Who can I give back to? How can I add value to other people? And that's what separates them, I think. I mean, I don't know, like, would you agree? I feel that.
Yeah, I think it's simple, but it's the work and the effort and the energy that goes into the front end of building relationships, right? I mean, that's it. And most people aren't willing to put in the work, if I'm going to interview someone, if I have a meaningful, conversation in front of me. Tonight, I speak to the Ohio football team. Again, tonight, I am the biggest Ohio football fan on the planet. Like, I know everything about it, like coaching staff, players, accolades, achievement, the upcoming season. Like, it's incumbent upon me, if I'm going to provide value, that the audience feels like this guy cares and this guy knows us. And if you want to stand out, that's how you show up. I'm not going to get on that call and give them some canned speech that they've heard before with a bunch of motivational quotes, because if I do that, I'm like everybody else, and people buy differences, not similarities. So I know this is like a really simple thing, John, but man, I just think, and even, it's amazing to me how many times you get on a podcast, and you probably experience this too.
Yep. Somebody
Somebody will say, okay, we got Jordan Montgomery here. Jordan, welcome to the show. Tell us about your journey. Who are you? And I'm like, what? Like, that is the laziest way to jump into a conversation. Like, that's awful, that doesn't make someone feel special. So anyway, we could talk about preparation and clarity for a long time, but that's a great place to start in adding value.
Absolutely. Now, you coach a wide range of people, and some of them are obviously like really successful. Are there some commonalities that you see that almost everybody has that holds them back from just being able to produce more, put out more, live closer to their potential? Is there something that you just notice that like every single person you coach, it's like they have the same thing block? Or is it just completely different across the board?
Well, I think I go back to self-awareness. I
Yep.
think top performers, top leaders have higher levels of self-awareness. And it's interesting, like when I speak to an audience, you kind of get to see the paradox of education play out. The paradox of education, right, is the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
That's right.
And it's so crazy when you speak to a sports team or a company, it's always like the top executives or the top leaders that are taking the most notes. It has nothing to do with what I'm saying.
Yep.
It has everything to do with their posture and their attitude. And their attitude is, I can learn something from every person that I meet, and I can learn something from every situation that I'm in. And because I've achieved a lot, I'm also more aware of all that I don't know. So I think it goes back to self-awareness, and it goes back to a desire and a hunger to learn.
Gotcha. Have you ever coached somebody like really successful that was just super screwed up? You're like, I don't know if I can help you.
Yes. A lot of those people. Yeah, a lot of them. And here's the deal. At the end of the day, I'm not for everyone and they're not for me. And
Yeah.
there might be somebody else that meets them on their journey that's a better fit to coach or lead them. But, it's really hard to help someone who doesn't want to help themselves. And if people aren't open to learning and they're not willing to ask questions or take feedback, if they lack self-awareness, we can work on communication, we can work on leadership development, but we're only going to be able to go so far if they're not really willing to open up their mind.
Absolutely. So I just have a couple quick final questions before we wrap up. The first one is if you could go back in time and talk to yourself, 45 seconds, all you get. And before, like right when you're in the middle of your financial boom and just crushing it, what would you say to yourself that you think would have the most impact?
Oof. And that is such a good question, and it's a loaded question.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I would encourage the 27-year-old me to think about the legacy that I wanted to leave. Who are you really becoming?
Right.
And if we're all the pilot of our own plane, I'll give you this analogy, and I wish I would have heard this at 27. You can decide to fly that plane at any speed, right? You can fly it through a storm. You could take it slow. You could take it too fast, or you could fly the plane the way that the plane is meant to be flown, right? And a lot of people forget that while they might just be late to their destination, there's people on that plane that will miss their connecting flight, right? And so, like for me, I was just flying it however I wanted to fly it. It was all about me. And I didn't realize that there were people on the connecting flight that were watching me, depending on me, following me. And I wish I would have understood the power and the impact of my leadership at a far earlier age. That was a little over 45 seconds.
No, I love that. Like, especially when you talk about impact. You ever seen that movie, The Butterfly Effect?
Yes.
God, it's like, talk about a movie that just hits you and makes you really realize that even the smallest action or decision that you make could change everything. You don't know, right? Because you don't get to relive it, but it's just like when you realize the things that you do and say have that much impact on the world around you, you learn to play a much bigger game, and you learn to give more and to do more. And just, it's like that book, Die with Zero.
Yes.
Just great book. So man, this has been such an incredible interview, and we didn't get to cover a lot of the things that I really wanted to, which is exactly why I hope that you'll share with everyone the best place where people can follow your work, your content. Like, where can people get more of you? I remember when I had David Meltzer on the podcast a while ago, and, he's just like, man, Fridays. And I can't tell you how many times people like would text me and they're like, dude, this Friday thing with Dave Meltzer is insane. Like, I love this. So where can people get, because I mean, everybody listening, they got this interview, but what they didn't hear is and watch some of the videos that I watched of you coaching, and you're freaking awesome at what you do, and you get people fired up and ready to produce and just go hard. So where can people follow your work?
Well, I appreciate that question. I'm very active on social media. Instagram's probably where we do the most.
Awesome.
Jordan M, as in Michael. So Jordan M Montgomery. Do a lot on LinkedIn. You can follow us on Twitter. Our website is montgomerycompanies.com. Anything that you could want to know about our company is on our website. And I would love to engage with anybody. You know, I hope that our impact and our relationship, our friendship goes beyond today. You know, so if somebody sends a message, I will respond back. I'll email back. My email is jordan@montgomerycompanies.com. I would invite anybody to reach out. I'd love to add value in any way that I can.
Awesome. Well, Jordan, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time and just you slowing down and just talking about the meaningful, important things that, you know, because I feel like sometimes when people think, oh, I want to be a peak performer, they think there's just like this, like, you know, this little high flying answer, right? Like work hard. But it's like, it's those little things, those nuances that you spoke about that I think really do make the biggest impact. And so I appreciate you sharing, reiterating those things. And I really hope that we can have you on the show again, just to talk about a different arena of what you do. I think that would be incredible. So thank you so much for your time today.
Well, John, you were thoughtful, you were prepared, you're insightful. I know that you care, and you can tell that you put great energy into this work. So thanks for being you. Thank you for having me. It was truly a blessing and an honor to spend some time with you.
Awesome. Thank you.